This is Sheila Cook of 3LM, Land and Livestock Management for Life, and I want to welcome all of you to be at this webinar called Be in Demand from Brands That Care. And this is being recorded so that we can play it later. So why are we here? Well, just transitioning 10% of agricultural production to best regenerative systems will sequester enough CO2 to reverse climate change and restore the global climate. That came out in an article by Andre Le of Regeneration International last October. And interestingly, he only named 2 forms of regenerative agriculture in that article, one of which was holistic management. The other one was BEAM, which is something offered by Dr. David Johnson at New Mexico State University and relates to some really advanced form of composting. And so this is exciting news that we could actually reverse climate change by our agricultural practice. And so what we're talking about today is how do we join up the dots? How do we help consumers and brands and farmers all make a loop that's all joined up and connected? And how do you get to take part in that? Well, Savory Institute has a 50-year history of restoring landscapes and livelihoods. And Alan Savory said, ultimately, the only wealth that can sustain any community, economy, or nation is derived from the photosynthetic process. In other words, green plants growing on regenerating soil. Well, that's really good news. But how do we know that our soil is regenerating? Well, that's something that we're going to discover today. There's a way that you can do that and assure yourself that your practice is actually regenerating soil. And it's called ecological outcome verification. This is a scientifically robust monitoring methodology developed by Savory Institute, building upon holistic ecological monitoring, which is a process embedded within holistic management that has informed holistic managers for decades. And it's something that's developed by Savory Institute and localized by Savory Network Hubs, which you can see dotted across the planet. And 3LM is the local hub here in the UK and Ireland. And so the objectives of ecological outcome verification, there's 3 key objectives. The first one is to really develop and manage robust land management protocols that are contextually relevant. So EOV is contextualized to the local habitat to discover what does regenerative mean here. And it's to validate that land management outcomes are meaningful and verifiable and relevant for producers. So it's not just a stamp that you're going to get, yes, I'm EOV verified, but it's actually beneficial because you're going to be learning about your practice and learning actually how you could improve it. And it will enable producers to deliver trusted and respected products that are really in demand from brands like are on this call today. So with this program, you'll be able to verify the regenerative nature of your land and then verify that it's steadily improving over time so that you can equip your food and fiber to be in demand from brands that care, like we have today, H. Dawson and Brannock Olin and the Ethical Butcher, and you'll get to hear from each one of them in turn today. We're going to hear a little bit from you, our participants, just to learn a little bit about you, and then turn it over to our market partners. And then we'll talk about what is ecological outcome verification, and at the end we'll have time for Q&A with all of our presenters. So let's have a chance to have you say a little bit about yourselves. I've got 3 questions for you down there. What country do you live in? Are you a farmer? I know not everyone who attends these webinars are farmers, but you're all doing really interesting things. And if you want to tell us about yourself a little bit more, there's a chat pod down at the bottom. And then if you are a farmer, question 3 allows you the chance to say more about what exactly you're doing. And Glenn, your cat is welcome to participate in the polls. I used to have cats and they regularly waved their tails at the right moments during webinars. They're really good at that. So Rick, if you're not hearing very well, I think there's something with your Wi-Fi connection, and you can get the recording later. So I'm sorry about that. Rick is joining us from France today. He's got a farm there. Okay, wonderful. We've got people coming from various countries today. It's nice to have you all participating. And a little over half of you are farmers, and you've got a variety of enterprises. But interestingly, a lot of cattle. Okay, and then sheep, poultry, gardens, and forestry. Super. Thank you for sharing that information. So it's time now to hear from our brands, and we're going to start with Joe Dawson. And these are market partners who are working together with 3LM and Savory Institute to bring a program to you. And we're going to hear first from Joe Dawson at H. Dawson. And so Joe, we'll need you to remember to unmute your microphone, and then over to you.
Hello Sheila, and hello everybody. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time. Can you hear me, Sheila?
Clear.
Okay, perfect. So see if I can give you a little bit of background about H. Dawson and the Dawson set of businesses. H. Dawson was founded in 1888 by my great-grandfather, and since I got involved in this business, we've been trying to blow the dust off the wool industry, and by finding ways of adding value to wool. One of the first of those was to create a web business called Wool Room, and Wool Room sells directly to the consumer. Fabulous bedding, where you basically the best sleep in the world, because you do sleep better when you sleep with wool. You get 25% more deep sleep. And the Wool Room is growing nicely and establishing a really good flock of followers, forgive the pun. Then equally at the same time, we then started a business called HD Wool. And HD Wool, which we'll come on to a little bit later on, is called is an active garment insulation. So it is replacing feather and down and synthetics, and particularly also wool obviously doesn't have the problem of microplastics, which obviously the synthetics do. And at the same time, it's a fabulous, not only is it a great insulator, but it's also great at moisture management, and it keeps you warm in a wide variety of conditions. And a couple of years ago, we also had the opportunity to take over majority control of Axminster Carpets, which was in difficulty at that time, and since we've turned that around and put it back on its feet, and it's also a great vehicle, wonderful brand to be able to communicate with the modern consumer about the benefits of wool, and equally as well, given our position in the chain, we'll be talking to the consumer about how the provenance of the fibre, and that's the essence of where we are. Moving on from here, the story we really want to tell is about this virtuous cycle between soil and wool and back to soil again. Wool has got an incredible amount of attributes, and one of those is the fact it's full of nitrogen, so it's a great fertilizer. I think in time we can see a situation where if we're able to reclaim wool products and grind them up again and then put them back on the land as a fertilizer, that's a really interesting story. We're quite a long way away from that because DEFRA is not particularly impressed with that concept at the moment, and particularly also doing that with carpets. But I think in time that'll be the case, and at the same time we're wanting to really add value to the whole chain, so it really is a virtuous cycle. This is just a screenshot of HD wool, the garment insulation side. So this is about the concepts that we hold dear. So animal welfare is really very important to us, and it's also very important to consumers as well. And then equally as well, this concept of reducing and then renewing, using renewable resources. I think it's also very important to state that our objective is to pay a fair price for the product, and I think we need to set up the chains to be able to do so. And then also the fibre integrity is very important to us, and also very important to our consumer. If they're going to pay a premium for something, they want to know exactly where it's come from and the story behind it. Here are a couple of illustrations of representations of the various different businesses in action. Top left and top right, again, presentations of Wool Room and how it presents itself to the consumer. And HD Wool, bottom left and bottom right. And I think I can finish off with regard to fair wool. Now, fair wool is a concept that we created I think over the last 18 months, really, it's been growing in our discussions. We've been discussing with brand partners of HD Wool, such as North Face and Timberland, and companies like that, Hugo Boss, others. And we decided we had to create something which was an independent mechanism to be able to assist the farmer to transition from traditional techniques or more recent techniques to holistic management, and we believe that fair wool is a way of doing so. In that, if we go to the market and offer organic wool, for example, and here we are, North Face, here's some organic wool, that's very nice, create a collection and then go and sell it. We could not do that with regeneratively farmed wool at this stage. Because it's a journey and it's a long journey, and we believe that obviously there needs to be an investment in education, investment potentially in capital materials such as electric fencing or water provision. So we're setting up this vehicle to be able to allow us to do that and to assist the farmer to be able to make that transition and to do it in the knowledge of support. That is the end of my presentation, so I'll be happy to take any questions on fair wool at the end, but I think that's about it from my perspective. So I'll hand over back to you, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Joe. And I know it's been a long time in the making for H. Dawson to get to this stage, and we are so pleased to have you on board with us today. And partnering with H. Dawson then is Brannock Olin. And I'm going to hand it over now to Alan Walsh and Tom Watson of Brannock Olin. And I want to make sure, Alan, are you able to hear us now?
How you doing? Can you hear me?
We hear you. Great. So you can do your presentation now.
We're just travelling in North Wales. I'm Alan Walsh. I've worked for a company called Texacloth UK Limited for a long time now. We've worked for 7 years buying wool directly from farmers throughout Ireland, Scotland, Wales and England. We came up with our new business Brannock Olin when we spoke with 3LM, because we see that some of our customers are wanting full traceability. They're looking for regeneration in farming and stuff, so we've decided to go with what these people are after. Joe came to us and asked for a certain product. You know, we've seen the end users, North Face, Hypnos, and all these guys are looking for a product that can be fully traced, that they can have a story directly from the farmer and pay the farmer a premium that they really deserve for a really good product. So we're putting a lot of effort into working with everybody to make sure that the farmer is going to get more money for a really good product, a natural product, and a product that can be used in all types of different bedding, clothing, carpets, and if you need to chuck it away, it can be chucked on stuff and biodegrade and put nutrients back into the ground. So we're passionate about this, and I think our passion will come through eventually, and we'll see a swing towards more natural fibres, which don't cost more than some of the Primaloft stuff that's out there already, that's not biodegradable, and it is creating microplastics in the environment. I'm also working very closely with my Australian partner here. We've allowed him in the country for now anyway, till Farage gets into power. I'll throw you over to Tom. Tom.
Thanks very much, Alan. So as Alan touched there about what our view going forward is, yeah, we're just really trying to, I guess, bring together the retailers and these fashion brands with the farmer, so there's that sort of connection between the two. So these retailers aren't just getting something inside a product or a product and not really knowing where it's come from. We want them to know who it is that's actually going to all the effort to supply their wool. And by doing that, them giving the premiums back to that farmer then is going to help encourage them to improve their farming practices. You know, at the end of the day, the farmer is the person who's got the best opportunity to improve the country that they're farming, and we think with the regenerative agriculture, it's by far the best way of improving the environment going forward. Yeah, I'm not too sure what else we really need to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's really for the future generation that if farmers can manage their land and leave nutrients back in the soil and very healthy animals for their future generations, and farmers should be thinking a lot further down the line than a couple of years. They should be thinking, you know, maybe even into 50 to 100 years down the line. I know Sheila's got a farmer who's thinking 1,000 years into the future, which is quite radical, but probably a good idea. We'll hand you back. Cheers, Sheila.
Thank you so much, Alan and Tom. And Katie writes, oh, great to have another Aussie in the UK. She's a sister Aussie with you, Tom. And we've got our next presenter is Glenn Burrows from the Ethical Butcher. Glenn, if you can start your webcam, let's see if that will work for you. And if not, I'll put your
hopefully you can see and hear me now.
Yes, I can. So take it.
Cool. Okay, Sheila, thanks for the introduction. So I'm one of the co-founders of the Ethical Butcher, and we're a startup. We're in the process of creating and launching the business, but we're what happens when an ex-vegetarian meets a meat trader. So I'm the ex-vegetarian. I studied food science and nutrition, and I was appalled at this was a long time ago, back in 1989, and I was so appalled at the industrial treatment of animals, and this was at the time of the BSE crisis. So I stopped eating meat and didn't do it for 25 years. My health suffered after this long period of time. I eventually went back to eating meat, but tried to do it in a conscientious way. I followed the career path of marketing, filmmaking, advertising, photography, that kind of thing. And then I met the co-founder of the business, Farshad, who is a meat trader who wanted to do things in a different way. And we started looking at the market for meat. We started looking at what would be the best potential for selling to the public online. And we became aware of the PFLA doing our research, and we started looking. Can you bear with me? Logan! Sorry, I've got noisy children in the background. So we started looking at the ethics of meat, sustainability of meat, and we came across the PFLA, Pasture Fed Livestock Association. And initially, that was our premise. We will source only grass-fed meat from PFLA members, and we decided that was going to be our business model. So 100% pasture-fed, and that produces a product that's healthier. The animals are healthier. It produces a healthier fat balance for humans eating the meat, and it's way better ecologically for the environment. Halfway through looking at this, we became aware of Savory Network and holistic management. That changed everything completely. So when we became aware of the possibilities of regenerative agriculture in relation to meat production, that's when we shredded the business plan and started from scratch. And we decided now that what our main focus is going to be is to just completely shift the paradigm or the narrative that's coming from this very powerful vegan lobby at the moment to say that eating meat is destroying the planet, to getting the message out there that correctly farmed meat can actually save the planet. And this is now the basis of our business. So we're launching hopefully in September, October this year. We'll be an online butcher. We'll serve the entire UK. We will source from PFLA certified farms, but we will take a proportion of those farmers and offer a bursary through 3LM to train a selected number of farmers in holistic management processes to try and drive down that carbon footprint so that we can say to people that we are or at least our producers are operating in a way that's going as close to being carbon neutral or even carbon negative as possible. And the idea really is just to fight this very powerful vegan message that's coming out, which we believe has roots in agribusiness. That most people now who seem to be going vegan are doing so because of environmental concerns, and we think that message needs turning on its head with proper farming. So as Joe just said earlier as well, there is so much that can happen with regeneration. So as Joe quite rightly said, wool can actually add, one of our packaging, for example, is going to be called Cool Wool. And the Cool Wool packaging can be composted and buried in the garden, and will add nitrogen back into the soil. So it's about sort of connecting people with this idea of a complete circle that when done correctly isn't removing but actually adding and benefiting the environment. So yeah, that's where we're at. Our business at the moment is in early stages, so we're talking to web builders and brand architects, if you like, the people who are helping us refine our message and tone of voice of the brand. And we hope to be shipping to the UK in sort of late September, early October. Yeah, that's about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Glenn. And I became vegan at around the same time as you for the exact same reason. But
And did you have a sort of bounce back of your health as well when you started eating meat again?
I didn't. I think I was a really careful vegan. I was really careful to get protein in my diet. But what made me switch back to eating meat was meeting Alan Savory and understanding how important livestock is to regenerating the ecosystem on the planet. And I decided, well, I better start eating meat again.
Amazing. So you came back for reasons of environment, which is an amazing message, really.
I did.
because I came back for, for reasons of health. I just found that most of the sources of protein I was eating were causing various autoimmune issues. And I was bloated. I was getting skin conditions. I had low muscle mass. I was tired. I had brain fog. I was always hungry, and I just didn't ever seem to be able to kind of feel like I was properly satisfied. And I still remember, the first ribeye I ate, or the first kind of, lamb's liver. It was almost like being high from doing a drug of some sort. I've never felt so sort of deeply satisfied from a meal, and I'd just been sort of craving some nutrients that I think my body was missing. But also, all the inflammation just disappeared when I cut out the grains, the lentils, the pulses, all that kind of thing. So for me, it was my health just was more important. And then when I discovered, these ways of farming as well, it all just sort of came into sharp focus for me, really.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to hear from all these business people who really are wanting to do great things. All right, so I'm going to speak to you now then about ecological outcome verification, which comes from Savory Institute and is co-developed by hubs. We localized this. And it's about imagineering a regenerative layer. It's about enabling farmers to be able to get some value for the hard work they're putting into regenerating their land. So first of all, it's scientifically robust, and essentially what happened, a man named Pablo Borelli, who is the hub leader for Ovis 21, they are the hub in Argentina, and he's been educating people in holistic management for, I think, at least 3 decades. It could be longer. But he was also an academic, and he wanted to make ecological monitoring scientifically robust. So he's the one who did that conversion and created that protocol. And then we as a hub have been working with Savory Institute for the last 3 years, developing it to be global, to go outside of Argentina, to go all around the planet, to be able to verify that, yes, this land is in a regenerative state. And so the EOV report is able not only to verify the land, but it's really informative for the farmer. It's very beneficial for the farmer to learn how things are going on their land. And we're introducing it now for the first time in 2019 here in the UK and Ireland. So there's this word we throw around, regenerative, that's become a bit of a buzzword, and I think it's important for us to define what we mean by that. So for us it has a specific meaning. It means to use a resource in a way that restores and enhances biological, psychological, social, and cultural function. And the UK is currently not in a regenerative state. I've got 2 pictures here, one obviously of arable land, and then another, a river in County Fife in Scotland. You can see the agricultural runoff going into the village river with that brown water. And Tony Juniper tells us that the cost to the UK is enormous, between 900 million and 1.4 billion pounds annually, the cost of this huge soil degradation that's going on. And then out of 218 countries assessed for biodiversity, the UK is ranked, unfortunately, 29th from the bottom, in spite of all the things that we know are happening here. And that link actually works if you want to click out to that link to that research from 2016. It's quite interesting study. So regenerative land is achieved through the stimulation of ecosystem processes. Water cycle, mineral cycle, energy flow, and community dynamics or succession. These are all the things that we're actually monitoring through ecological outcome verification. And as Lady Eve Balfour said, the health of the soil, the health of the plant and the animal, and man is one and indivisible. And that's what this is all about. So we catch light and pass it on. That's the statement of purpose of one of the farms that practices holistic management in Scotland. We love that statement of purpose. And ecological outcome verification is going to help you as a farmer to really be sure that you are delivering the public good, which is what the payments will be made on in the future. If we really go through with Brexit, the payments will be made based on delivering public good. Well, it's better to start now and know that you are in fact doing that, and you're leaving behind regenerating soils. So EOV verifies that the land is in a regenerative state, and it can be integrated with other standards, and it already has been done. So there are 2 EOV verified products in the world today. One is in the United States, and that's from White Oak Pastures, and it's their meat bars sold through Epic Bars of General. It's now a division of General Mills. Originally it was a privately held company. And they're partnered with USDA Organic. And then the other one is wool in South Africa, and they're partnered with, what is it called, the Regenerative Wool Standard. And so it plays well. For example, it plays well with the PFLA, or the Pasture Fed Livestock Association. These go hand in hand. Well, why is that? It's because what the EOV is verifying is the resource conversion piece in the chain of production, which refers to land. All we're verifying is land. We're not actually verifying that this animal was grown on this soil. That is taken up by another standard, such as the PFLA, the Pasture Fed Livestock Association. So holistic practice, of course, underpins ecological outcome verification. And so in order for a farmer to participate, there are just 2 things really that you need to do. One is you need to have 2 measurements of your land, and they need to be indicating that it's a regenerative trend line. And so here you can see you would get your first EOV done in your year 0 as your baseline, and then you would get a second one done a year later, and we need to be seeing a positive trend line. The other thing that you need to do is you need to complete holistic management training, and I know a number of you on the call today you're either in the process of doing that, or you already have completed your holistic management training, so you're already on your way to being able to participate in the program. So we use a localized scorecard. You can see some farmers where we've been already doing this last year here in the UK in the pictures, and we monitor the leading indicators at the soil surface. We also monitor lagging indicators such as soil carbon. And farmers can become trained to self-verify, and they would self-verify in those in-between years. They can do that short-term monitoring in the in-between years, and then 3LM needs to do the baseline, and then every 5 years. So there are many reasons why to get verified, ecological and social, but mostly it's so that you know that your practice is really increasing biodiversity, increasing photosynthesis, really improving ecosystem function, the health of the soil. And the social benefits, you can really be recognized as truly delivering public goods, and tradability through an international recognition and international standard known as ecological outcome verification. So for more information, you can contact either Christopher Cook or myself, Sheila Cook, at info@3lm.network. So now I'm thinking that probably some of you have some questions, and I've got pictures of the various presenters here. And there's two ways you can ask your question. One is you can just type your question down below in the chat pod below. And if you know how to use the microphone in this technology, you're welcome to turn on your microphone and speak your question. And hopefully we get a few questions. While we're waiting, I'd like to ask Joe Dawson a question. And I know you've been at this for a long time. And Joe, I'm just wondering, how long have you been thinking about doing this? And what triggered your initial thinking to take H. Dawson in this direction?
Well, thank you very much indeed for that. Great question, Sheila. I've been pondering that during this the presentation by the other presenters. I grew up on a farm, and we practiced all of the things that we shouldn't have been practicing, and that was out of ignorance, I think. Well, obviously it was. And basically we were being encouraged at the time by the agri-feed business to basically used a lot of fertilizer. We ended up with cat soil. We ended up with a lot of thistles, rushes throughout the, and also very big fields as well. You know, some really large fields which we'd regularly do silage, and we were running at about 1,000 head of sheep and 100 head of cattle on the hill farm that we were on, and this is the way that farming was done, and so that was my background. And then I came into I think I saw Alan Savory speak at one of our International World Textile Organization events. And so the IWTO, the International World Textile Organization, is basically like United Nations of Wool. And at that time I was the treasurer of the organization, and I had the opportunity to see Alan speak, and at the same time also then have a chat with him. And to me that was just a moment of clarity, in that if we as a business, and this was getting on for 6-7 years ago now, if we can then make a link between the farm and the activity on the farm and the end consumer, then it becomes not only a very powerful marketing story, but also an important step for a business and also for the planet. And I could see that there was a fundamental link there that is broken, that was broken, and that's the driver for me, to be able to re-establish that link.
Thank you very much, Joe. And I see we've got some other questions down here. And Katie is asking, are there any plans to have government support this initiative? And as you can imagine, we have been trying every which way to do that, as many others are. And Christopher, my husband and business partner, he's been the one responsible for that. He couldn't be with us today. However, he is working on getting Alan Savory in front of a number of members of Parliament when he comes to the UK in June for Groundswell. And so he's actually organizing an event with one of the members of the House of Lords on Friday the 28th, and that'll be a closed session with other members of Parliament talking about holistic management and how it could benefit us as we make this transition through Brexit, and how land is managed and how subsidies are geared up. So yes, we are definitely trying for that, and if anyone can offer us any assistance in that regard, we would certainly appreciate it. All right, then Rick asks, is this program available in France and in Europe? And the answer is yes, but it will take time for it to be rolled out to the various countries. I can tell you that the Nordic countries, Sweden and Norway, they're underway because the hub there has undertaken the same thing that we have. They're one of the prototype hubs, as is the hub that represents the Iberian Peninsula, which is Spain and Portugal. They're also participating. I don't think the Turkish hub is participating just yet, but they will in the future. And then we've got 2 hubs coming on stream. One is in Germany and one is in France. And they are still working on simply becoming a hub. And once they become a hub, then they'll have quite a bit of work to do to catch up and get that going. But the reason why it has to be localized by a hub is because it's contextualized to a region. And the region, if you're familiar with the language of brittleness, I'm just going to type that word because I know not everybody knows that word. But brittleness is a concept that comes out of holistic management. And mostly it relates to moisture and how conducive to life is that ecosystem, because obviously life needs moisture and it needs it in a consistent way over time. So the more consistently available moisture is, the more non-brittle a habitat is. And the less consistent that moisture is available, we call that more brittle. And life has to adapt harder to that kind of, well, it's interesting. I think one of our presenters might have made this chat pod a little big. Let's see if I can get it under control here. I'm just going to hide it. There we go. And I'm going to open a new chat pod. So I apologize for that. There, we got a new chat pod for you to ask your question. So fire away if I missed your question. Okay, so back to brittleness. So Europe is divided, I haven't counted, but I'm going to guess about 9 different ecological regions. And there happen to be 2 of them in the UK and Ireland. One is Atlantic North and the other is Atlantic Central. And because the use of tools varies by brittleness, then we need a different scorecard because we can expect different outcomes. And so we'll have a couple of different scorecards to use in the UK and Ireland. But it's interesting that the flora and fauna and the eco regions are so similar in the British Isles. So we can do it in a uniform way. But I've looked at France, and while France does share, I think it's Atlantic Central, I think where you are, Rick, probably is a different ecoregion to us, and I expect it's much more brittle than where we are. So we'll need to wait to help you get into the program. I have been working with Germany to see if we can get EOV going a bit quicker there. Now, Joe has a question to the farmers. What barriers do you see to implementing regenerative agriculture on your farm? And I'm happy for you to either type an answer to Joe or please open your microphone and we would love to hear from you. What barriers are you facing as you try to either practice holistic management or what you're considering to be regenerative agriculture on your farm? And I'll give you a minute to make those answers. I thought Andy was typing an answer. And go ahead and after you type your answer, be sure to hit send or the enter key, the little chat balloon down below, and it will send that message through. And I'm going to just make that chat window bigger. It's a little bit tiny for us to work with, isn't it? We need more space. Here we go. The older generation. Okay, that's interesting. You say more about that, Andy. Is that a situation in your family, or is that something that you're observing as you look out? The older generation can be resistant. Interestingly, we've worked with farmers that have had that challenge, and we have found ways to work that through. I think there's always a hesitation to take a risk, isn't there, for the older generation? They saw what worked on their farm, and they're hesitant for change to happen. They perceive it as a risk, and so one of the best ways is to be able to take them somewhere. Yeah, it's about change and pace of change, and also a bit of climate change denial. Yeah, that's interesting. I see we've got quite a few others typing here, so I'm just going to pause while we get your responses to that question. Rick says, I started farming at age 50 with no experience, so I did not have bad habits. That's one of the benefits of starting late in life without growing up on a farm. You don't have any preconceptions about what's good or bad farming. And you don't have an older generation either. Well, you may do, and maybe perhaps your wife. I don't know, was your wife a farmer, Rick? Rick is an American now living in France, practicing holistic management there on his farm with his French wife. Nope. Katie says, is regen farming being talked about at universities in relevant studies? Now, I'm interested if any of our other presenters would like to make a comment on that. What I can tell you from 3LM's experience, we have tried numerous times to get universities teaching holistic management, or at least to allow a public talk. And we did our first public talk at a university about a month ago, and it was in Edinburgh. The veterinary college invited us to come. But I think they were surprised by what they heard, and it wasn't, in American English we would say it wasn't kosher. In other words, it rubbed against the grain of what they're teaching in their college. So we created dissonance there, let's say. We created some dissonance in the most gentle and kind way that we could. But what we're often told by especially young people who've just graduated from an agricultural college, they'll say, do you know that everything you just told me is the opposite of what I learned in college? And I always say, yes, I do. I do know that. Let's see, Rick says it seemed odd that chopping up worms was a good idea. There you go. That's one I haven't heard of before. Well, you know, humanity is going through a paradigm shift, and so it takes us time. It takes us time to let go of the old ways of thinking, our old beliefs. And that's what we're doing. We're doing together. And what's wonderful about working with H. Dawson, Brannock Allen, and the Ethical Butcher is now farmers don't have to do it alone anymore. There's somebody there that wants to buy your product. And these people have put out big goals for themselves. They want all of their product to be sourced from regenerative land very soon. So that means we need a lot of farmers. And that's really exciting, and I'm so delighted to have you all here to meet each other. Okay, let's see, what else do we have? Andy says market pull is essential, so this is great to hear. Yeah, actually H. Dawson was very bold, and in January put out a press release saying they intend to have 100% of their wool sourced from regenerating soils by 2025. That's a heck of a lot of wool. So we need a lot of wool growers growing all different kinds of wool. H. Dawson sells all kinds of wool. So we need you to sign up with Brannock Allen, and then Brannock Allen sells it on to H. Dawson. And Ethical Butcher, let's have you talk, Glenn, you haven't talked too much about what you're looking for. What kind of meat are you looking for? How do you work with farmers? What kind of farmer are you looking for, and how does that all work?
I was hoping you could invite me back, because I also didn't really talk about our plans to partner with 3LM to offer some bursaries with some financial help to farmers who are willing to willing and wanting to go through this process, because you know, a part of our plan is we're expecting very, very quickly that our demand is going to massively outstrip supply of holistically managed beef. There are quite a few farmers who are operating, you know, who are certainly operating in a very carbon neutral, if not carbon negative way, who are making lamb. But with beef, it's a very, very small percentage. And Sheila, you'll know better than me, but I think it's only about 1.5% of UK beef is even 100% grass-fed, let alone kept by holistic management. So you know, our business plan is based on selling meat that is is coming from regenerative agriculture. So you know, we've got our funding through Crowdcube, and part of that money is going to go directly through 3LM to paying farmers to get to go through EOV, to do holistic management training. And really, at the moment, we're looking for some farmers who can sign up with us. And we have a slightly strange criteria for our first batch of farmers, because we have a massive problem with telling the public what we're doing. And we also have a massive problem with the public who think they're buying grass-fed at the moment and aren't, because of DEFRA rules allowing labelling. So at the moment, anyone buying grass-fed meat, the meat might only have spent 51% of its life eating grass, and the rest could have been grains and feed. And this is because of the way that DEFRA food labelling is worded, in that the diet has to be predominantly grass. So in an extreme situation, that can mean 51%. This is the whole reason that Pasture-Fed Livestock Association exists, is to tell people that if you want grass-fed, it has to be grass-fed. So we're really putting it out there. If there's any PFLA farmers listening now, get in touch. We want to help you become. We want to help you with EOV. We want to help you with holistic management practices. And really, what we're saying to you is, this will safeguard your future. We will guarantee that we can buy everything you can produce at above market value, and your land will be better off for it in the long run. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. But obviously, we're called the Ethical Butcher. We're not just selling beef. We're selling poultry, pork, and wild game as well. And that's a whole nother discussion. We've had to kind of rewrite our own rule book for that, because all terminology such as organic and free range, when referring to pork and poultry, for example, is virtually meaningless. So a large part of our job as a business is we're going to be very, very content heavy. We're actually working with a brand director of Vice Media, and you probably know Vice as it used to be a magazine, it's now a massive news outlet. And we're working with Vice Media to work out how our business can effectively become a media outlet, because there's so much information that we need to get out to the public, to tell them that this is what regenerative agriculture is, this is what grass feeding actually means, this is what organic actually means, this is why you as a consumer should be demanding the kind of products that are coming from the Savory Network and pretty much nothing else. So, you know, a large part of what we're going to be doing is this type of education. So if you're a farmer, you want to go through EOV, you want to learn holistic management, there's a small condition that you allow us to be there with cameras to kind of record the process and show the world what we're all trying to do. But yeah, please get in touch.
Thank you for that, Glenn. And we've got another question for you. It comes from HB. Glenn, is your project putting any emphasis on nose-to-tail eating? And then Andy says, Glenn, do farmers have to be organic certified?
Okay, so I'll deal with the nose-to-tail thing first. And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. We will have a huge emphasis on that. There's actually something really interesting has come out of us setting the business up. So as we're starting to launch, our business as the Ethical Butcher is essentially business to consumer. So we will act as wholesaler and retailer, and we're effectively going to be an e-commerce business. As we were setting the business up, some of the existing clients of my business partner are B2B. So he at the moment is in the meat trade selling to restaurants. And the problem with restaurants is that they don't say, oh, I'll take half a cow. They say, oh, I want to take 300 kilos of ribeye. Well, there probably isn't 300 kilos of ribeye available from the entire PFLA at any one time. So some of the restaurants who are contacting us saying, we really want the type of meat that you're talking about. We want this high quality. We want the grass-fed. We're saying to them, well, if you want it, you're going to have to get more creative with your menus. And instead of us giving you huge quantities of one cut, you're going to have to take an entire carcass or half a cow, and your chefs are going to have to figure out how to deal with all those different cuts over a period of time. And there are a few restaurant chains who are sort of saying, okay, if this is how it has to be, then this is how we'll do it. But when I talked earlier about us effectively becoming a content hub, a large part of that is going to be educating the public in how to cook unfamiliar cuts. There's so much emphasis with beef particularly on, you know, sirloin, fillet and ribeye, and so much of the rest of the animal gets forgotten about and just used for burger meat. Well, we really, all we have to do for that is we've got a network of chefs. I'm meeting with, you know, a very well-known chef and food writer called Gizzy Erskine very soon. We have the head chef of the Devonshire Club, who's got Michelin stars, who's working with us. We have the restaurant who's the development chef of Pret a Manger for 15 years, is going to be doing recipe development for us. And every month, our boxes will be going out with recipe cards with suggestions of how people can have a more nose-to-tail approach. And we will have a channel devoted to offal. We'll have a channel devoted to, you know, the lesser cuts. But that's a massive, massive push for us. But not just nose to tail, but also encourage people to try venison if they've never had it, or to eat more game, or just to kind of vary not just the cuts, but actually the animals as well. And sort of slightly on this subject, there's a really interesting part of our marketing strategy is we found out that there is a link between the flavour of the meat and the terroir, or the land that the meat was produced on, very much in the same way that there is with fine wine. So we want to really be the first butcher, online butcher, to offer quite detailed tasting notes with our product. So, you know, people think that meat just tastes like meat and that it's a generic product. Well, most of the time it's because it's the same breed being fed the same food. But when we start buying from you guys who are farming properly, it's certainly not a generic product. And we're going to hold tasting events. We're going to have like Grand Crus. We're going to have, you know, we're going to have very detailed notes. And this creates product differentiation. It links back to the land, and more importantly, it links back to the farmers who are producing, and it adds value to the product. So that is, you know, it's adding some value to what people perceive, you know, as being just meat. That's a really important thing. As to the other question here from Andy, do farmers have to be organic certified? No, they don't, but our standard at the moment, so when we first start buying beef and lamb, we are only going to buy from pasture for life assured farms. And the reason for that is there are some farmers who have contacted us through social media and various other ways saying, I don't give my animals any supplemental feed, can you buy from us? And we're like, well, you would have to prove that. And really, the PFLA have done that job for us. They've done that job of due diligence for us. So for us, rather than having to visit every individual farm who might only have a few cattle, we're just saying, go down the PFLA route, become a member of the Pasture Fed Livestock Association, and then we know for sure that you're not using supplemental feed and the effect that that's having on the animal. And that really is our starting point. That's our minimum level of ethics, if you like. And what we're hoping to do is take as many PFLA farmers as we can and get them through Sheila's program, because that's the gold standard. That's where things get really interesting, is the regenerative agriculture. A lot of the PFLA farmers, they're a fantastic network. Some of you may be in the PFLA, but there is an incredible email network where farmers share information about better ways of doing things. And a lot of them are quite possibly farming soil now, for a better way of putting it. They are probably running a carbon negative business. They have their zero input agriculture, a lot of them, and they probably are in a situation where they're creating such a large carbon offset that they're operating, that they're sequestering more carbon than the farm is producing in totality. But without the EOV, without the actual scientific proof, it's conjecture. So we really want to get those guys, get them through EOV, and then we can turn around to our public and say, here's the traceability, and the meat you're buying is carbon negative. So yeah, that's organic isn't necessary, but absolutely no supplemental feed is.
Thank you so much, Clint, for that. We've just got a couple more things to do, and then we'll be finished up with today. I just want to let you know that Alan Savory will be coming to the UK, and he will be speaking at Groundswell, both on the 26th and 27th of June. He'll be giving roughly the same talk on both days, so if you can only attend one, that's fine. You won't miss anything the other day. 3LM will be there in stand SB8, and all of our market partners that you saw today will be with us at Groundswell. And we look forward to meeting you there in person. And there are a couple of special opportunities to meet Alan Savory. And again, these links, if you click them, they work. They're live links. The first one is for dinner with Alan and Jody. And this is very informal. The PFLA offer a lovely dinner on that night. And basically you buy your ticket on the day, and if you click on that link, it gives you all the instructions on what to do. You buy your ticket on the day, it's 15 pounds, and then come over to the 3LM booth at 5 o'clock, and we'll go over to get our meal together, and then come back and sit together at the 3LM booth. So you'll be able to have a chance to actually talk with Alan and Jody. The other opportunity is on the Friday afternoon. He will be at the Rudolf Steiner House. And we just got word today that Charles Massey will also be joining us at Conversations from the Edge. And Charles is another keynote speaker at Groundswell, and he's coming from Australia. And he's a huge advocate of holistic management, and he's written a book about people practicing holistic management in Australia. So that's going to be really exciting to have those two events. And then finally, just thank you for attending this webinar. And I would like to invite you to fill out these 3 questions. So what was relevant or interesting for you in today's session? It certainly helps us learn about how to make this kind of communication better in the future, if you tell us that. And what are your areas of interest? We've got some options there for things for you to find out about. And then if you would like a follow-up call on the question 3, you can put your name and telephone number there, and that will not be broadcast into the room, so that's only knowable by us and the presenters, but the other participants won't see that. And so I want to thank all of you for participating. Wonderful job by our presenters. I was so pleased to have you all on board again today, and thank you so much to our participants for coming and sticking with us the whole entire time. That's not so common in webinars these days. People often come on and they jump off in the first 5 minutes, but you all stuck in and asked great questions, so we really appreciate that. So that's it for our webinar today. Thank you.